The purpose of this video is to go through some of the verbal questions that are being asked by the lenders to help you guys know what's coming when you go to transition off of your COVID forbearance plan. If you're a subscriber to my page, welcome back. If not, make sure you subscribe, like the video below. And I do encourage you out there, if you just have a situation going on with your bank that you feel like you want to just like share about, almost as like a journaling exercise, leave me a comment. I love hearing about what's going on out there, and it does help other homeowners to kind of read what's going on with other people. Okay, so on August 31st, as we all know by now, the government-backed investors, so FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the VA, and USDA all announced kind of like updated guidelines around how to try to help people transition from these COVID forbearance plans back to being current on their mortgage. So if you're watching this as a new homeowner, your first step is to figure out who your investor is on your loan. And then before you watch this video, go watch the videos I've posted regarding each investor to kind of figure out what your individual options are. But if you know you're one of these COVID forbearance people and you know you have one of the government investors that I just listed that has these protections out there, chances are that your lender is going to be able to put you in review for a transition option by doing a verbal conversation with you on the phone. So this is kind of new for loss mitigation, right? Normally in the past, and for people who are not defaulted related to COVID, there's a paper application process. But part of what the government is trying to do is they're trying to say, okay, there's so many people who are in this situation and we want this process to be smooth and easy for homeowners. And so we're going to make this process verbal, meaning you can ask for this review, you can ask for your option on the phone. But you want to be prepared for what they're going to ask you verbally, so that you don't accidentally answer the question incorrectly and get yourself slotted into an unaffordable plan. So what you do have to understand is while the government guidelines are trying to help you, mortgage lenders are always going to try to do things to kind of trip you up or put you into an option that's most financially beneficial for them. And so I'm just going to go through the questions they're going to ask you so that you can be a little bit more prepared. Now, since this is all new, it was just announced on August 31st, I have had 4 of these calls, and this is kind of a general kind of summary of the different questions. Depending on your different lender and different investor, the questions might sound a little bit different, but overall, this is kind of what you're going to be asked. So the first thing you're going to ask you is the hardship resolved? You want to say yes to this question. If you are trying to get current and resume making your mortgage payments, you will say yes. If you have realized that due to the pandemic, there is no foreseeable way for you to recover the household income and you cannot make regular mortgage payments and you don't want to resolve the issue, then you should answer no. But if you're somebody who's just trying to get back current with the bank and resume making payments, answer yes. The bank wants to hear that your hardship is resolved and that you're ready to get going. Now, if your income has not recovered to the point that it was before COVID, but you do want to start making mortgage payments again, you should still answer yes to this question. What will happen is you'll want to be slotted into one of these modification programs where they can try to kind of lower the payment. But saying no, if you answer the question, is the hardship resolved, and you say no, the bank will not think that you're ready to enter into one of these plans. And then they'll kind of start talking to you about liquidation options, like selling the home, doing a deed in lieu. And so to avoid going down that path, you want to say yes, the hardship is resolved if you're trying to get on one of these payment plans. Then they're going to ask you if you're living in the property. So for many of the guidelines that were announced, it is a requirement that you be occupying the property, that it be your primary residence in order for you to get one of these COVID transition options. Pretty straightforward. I would imagine that most of you out there are living in the home. If you're not living in the home, you might want to talk with an attorney about what your options are for a rental or a vacant property. But they will say, are you living in the property? You likely are, since this is likely your primary residence, so you would say yes. And then they're going to ask something that sounds like, are you able to pay the full amount immediately? The reason the bank is asking this question is because they always want you to pay the full amount immediately, right? The best case scenario for a bank is that they put you on this forbearance plan, and then at the end of the plan, you pay everything you owe at once and you move on. Likely, if you had to go on a COVID forbearance, that's not a realistic option for you, right? And who would be able to do that? If for some reason you can do that, that is going to be a good option, right? It's the lowest maintenance option. It allows you to pay everything at once and get current. But like I've said, and like we all kind of suffered financially through COVID, you likely aren't able to pay it all at once. So if they ask you to pay the full amount immediately, you would say no. So far you've told them, yes, my hardship is resolved. I live in the property and I'm unable to pay the full amount immediately. The next question that they're going to ask is going to be something where they can kind of try and slot you onto a high repayment plan. I've heard this asked in many different ways, but it sounds something like this. Are you able to pay half the amount you owe and then make double payments? So what they're trying to do again is they're trying to slot you into, if you can't reinstate the full amount, then they're going to try to slot you into an amount or a payment plan that provides them very high payments. And so what they're asking is, can you make a lump sum payment of half of the amount that you owe and then resume regular mortgage payments and an additional mortgage payment? They're trying to get you to pay them back in the fastest amount of time possible. If you're able to do this, if you have half the amount that you missed and you're able to make 2 mortgage payments a month, like I've said in my other videos, this might actually be a good option for you. It would get you current fast. But most people, this isn't going to be an option, and so you'd want to tell them no. No, you are not able to make half of what you missed, and no, you're not able to make double mortgage payments. That will then kind of move you down the line to the next question. Then they're going to ask you a question, and what they're trying to determine with this next question is whether you can make the exact same mortgage payment that you were making before COVID, or whether you're going to be somebody who needs to be reviewed for a lower payment. So the question says, has your income recovered exactly as it had before? So if you are somebody who is totally fine making the exact same mortgage payment you were making before COVID, you would answer yes. Now, this describes a lot of you guys out there. A lot of you guys had a temporary layoff from work. Everything's resolved. You're back to work. You're making your money, and you just want to resume regular mortgage payments. If this describes you, you can say yes, and then they will start looking at probably a payment deferral or a partial claim, depending on who your investor is. As a quick reminder, a deferral or a partial claim takes the full amount you missed. It creates kind of a subordinate lien on title, or they kind of put that amount on the end of the loan, and then your original mortgage just moves forward and you're making the same amounts you were making before COVID. At the maturity date, you cover whatever they deferred. So that's kind of what they're getting at. If you're somebody whose income has recovered, and you want to resume making mortgage payments, but something has happened such that the original mortgage payment amount that you were making is too high for the household and you need it to be dropped a little bit, you likely are going to be somebody who wants to go down the loan modification path. That will kind of review you for potentially a reduced interest rate. And there are all sorts of different kind of like special loan modifications for COVID people depending on the investor. So when they ask the question, has your income recovered exactly as it had before? If you want those deferral or partial claim options, you can say yes. If you really just only believe that you can stay current if the payment is lowered, you'll want to answer no, and that will kind of trigger a loan modification review. The next question they're going to ask is, are you able to resume making payments immediately? And what they're trying to do here is just determine when your first payment date can be. Now, you're not going to get a ton of time, right? You're not going to have your first payment become due in 6 months. But if you're kind of calling in the middle of the month, they're trying to determine if they should start your new payment on the first of the next month or on the month after. And so that is kind of up to you. Most of the homeowners that I work with want a little buffer time to prepare for their next payment. So right now it's like the middle of September. I'm trying to get my clients' next payments due November 1st. That will give them the month of October to kind of organize their finances and prepare for their next payment. So you just answer that honestly based on what your finances are. If you just want to start paying them and you're ready for this to be over and you want to just make a payment, then you can just tell them that at that point. And then the last question that I've heard asked, it's very similar to another question I listed, but I've heard them say, can you pay exactly the same amount you were paying before? And again, this is the bank's way of kind of trying to decide whether a deferral or a partial claim, meaning just taking that amount, shoving it onto the end and having you go back with regular payments, is the right option for you, or whether you actually need to be reviewed for a reduced payment. And so that's going to be, again, depending on your financial circumstances. I've had clients think the payment deferral option is best, and I've had clients need a loan modification because something happened with their income through COVID that made it so they can't fully recover. So these are kind of the verbal questions that are going to be coming to you. There could be different, there could be more questions, there could be less questions. This is kind of a summary of the different lenders that I've heard asking these questions. As I continue to work with more and more lenders, I'll post updates to these questions. But before you get on the phone to request your transition option, you really want to think about, can you resume regular mortgage payments, or Do you need your payment dropped a little bit? There are different protections depending on investors. So figure out who your investor is, watch my videos depending on investors so you can understand the individual options better. And then when you make this phone call, you'll be a little bit more prepared. After you answer these questions, they will read you information about the different options. This is boilerplate. This will come directly from the investor. They will tell you likely you have an option between a deferral or a loan modification, or they might tell you based on the answers to your questions, this is what we want you to do. So the other kind of thing to understand that is discussed in more detail is that the lenders are putting you through a waterfall of options. They want you to reinstate first, then they want you to go on a high repayment plan. If you can't do that, then they start to look at the actually helpful options like a deferral or a loan modification. But you want to understand that it is tiered. And so when they start to talk to you about your options, if they're trying to force you into one that isn't what you want, you need to tell them, no, I can't do that. Please move me to the next phase in the waterfall. Hopefully at the end of the call, you guys will have settled on an option that will work for you. The information you want to be asking the bank at that point is my file with the underwriting department? That's how you know that things have gone well and that they've actually moved it to the decision makers. And that should start a 30-day time frame for a decision. Now, once you make it through that call, you're not done. You want to call them every 48 hours to make sure that everything is still in review and that they don't need anything additional. So that's kind of what you can expect if they're able to do a streamlined options. There are some exceptions and times when the banks will request documents. Again, if you're a pre-COVID default person who got a forbearance but technically defaulted before COVID, you might not be able to get these streamlined verbal options. So you do need to do some work on your own to figure out what investor you have, when you defaulted, what the available options are for you, and then you kind of make this call when you already have in mind what would be best for you. Good luck.